Hi everybody, Gisele Grenier here from artplace.ca. For today's session, I'm going to be doing, I'm working on the Book of Backgrounds, and this is the 2013 version. Last year's version, I created a whole bunch of backgrounds, not so much concentrating on technique, but they were some pretty quick and easy backgrounds. This year, I'm spending more time on technique, and I do a lot of talking because I'm explaining everything, especially for beginners who are just getting into art or journaling or mixed media. And for those of you that are more advanced, you can just fast forward through the sections. My goal is to have the video done where, especially the beginners, aren't left with questions. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. So for this particular session, what I'm going to be doing is working with as a resist technique, but I'm going to be using alcohol to basically spread paint out to leave an area blank. And I'll explain that in a second. So I've prepared 3 backgrounds already, and I'm going to show you how I did them on some scrap paper. All the supplies that I end up using will be listed at the end of the video, so you don't have to worry about taking notes. And I'm working in my Strathmore journal because I couldn't find a use for it. When I do my journaling, I always use my handmade journals. I always make my own journals. But I picked this up because I was basically doing a product review, and it's a beautiful journal, but I just had no use for it because it was a manufactured journal. But it's great for techniques. And this is the visual journal, the Strathmore Visual Journal. So on this first page, what I did is I put a coat of DecoArt Elegant Finish Metallic Paint, and it was Silver Sage. But what I did is I rolled it on with a roller, and then I dusted it with a mop brush. And I'm going to show you how I did that. On these 2 pages, all I did was put Permanent Alizarin Crimson on. No, I lied. Quinacridone Rose. Is this what I used? Yeah, Quinacridone Violet. Sorry. I'm looking at this going, this isn't the color. Yeah, the Traditions Quinacridone Violet. And I did a slip slap, and I just used a foam brush. It was nothing fancy, okay, but I have another step to go on to here. So I just wanted to prep this just to save some time. This one here has a bit of an extra technique. So what I did, let me just move this out of the way. Let's put it over here. So I just got some scrap paper. Now this is Terraskin, and then this is mixed media paper. Now with the Terraskin, it's paper made from stone. For this technique, it'll work. Okay, but anytime you're using like a watercolor or a staining where you want the paper to be stained, Terraskin isn't really suitable for that because it's water resistant. Okay, but paint, thick paint, works fine. As well, if you're using extremely thin paper, like 90-pound or less, what I suggest is to prep your page with a coat of acrylic gesso and then let it dry for a few hours. DecoArt has on the label 24 hours. I do that for my professional artwork, but for stuff like this, I don't. I just wait for it to dry. Okay, so a coat of gesso. If your paper is 140 pounds or thicker, you can work on it as is, because we are putting acrylic paint on there. So let's see. So the Silver Sage is in a beautiful, easy to use container, and I like these because you can actually dip the brush in there. Now this is the metallic paint, and you can use it with a big brush or little brush, doesn't matter, because we're going to be doing the rolling. Okay, so what you could also do is just apply it with a palette knife. Whatever is easier for you, it doesn't matter. Okay, it doesn't matter. And you always have to make sure you shake it first. Okay, so I'll just put this on here, and then with a little roller, and just get it started. All you want is, you want good coverage. You can also put this onto a tray and roll it. You want good coverage, but you don't want it slip slapping. Like, you don't want it to be thick like that. And see, that even by itself is really, really pretty. And I'm doing it in small, even layers. Okay, so that's that. Then from here, what I would do is then take a mop brush, or you can use a hacky brush, anything that's goat hair, and just tickle the paper like so. Now this you have to do fairly quickly if you're doing multiple backgrounds, because you don't want to let this paint dry in the brush, and the mop brush must be used dry for this technique. And we're not going for an airbrushed effect. I'm looking for a very soft, diffused look. Okay, now it is metallic, so it's a little hard to see. There you go. It's a little hard to see because of the shine. Now on this one, this is the, now am I using the gessoed side? No, I'm using the raw paper side. And I can turn around and just do this part by hand like so. And I'll roll it after. You can as well just use the brush if you want, but I wanted that kind of like marbled look. You see the paper's curling? This paper is the, this is 90-pound mixed media paper. I have no idea who makes it. This is just scrap paper that I have leftovers. But look at that. It's really curling. Now this brush now I will put in water. Then take my roller. The rollers to get the texture. And this roller here comes in a set. It's from Nickel. It comes in a set with a bunch of other texture type of rollers. These are really cool. I'll be demonstrating those later on. This now I will also put in water. And then take my brush. And, oh, do I have, should have got my little mini tweezers. I'm just going to hold that down and then just soften it. If you let the acrylic paint dry in your mop brush, first of all, it'll be very hard to clean, and then all I would recommend from there is just to use a 1000 plus stain remover, also known as Winning Colors. You soak it for a little bit. You have to use it with water, but I have yet to have a brush where I couldn't get it clean, even if brush that's dried overnight. It's non-toxic and it's local. That's why I use it. Okay, and I'll just kind of tickle that. And then I'll put this in water. My palette knife I don't care about. But there you go. So you see the difference. Whoopsie, whoopsie, whoopsie. Okay, see the finish on that one. So that's brushed on, then rolled on, then diffused. And this is strictly rolled on. So you get really a bunch of really good different effects. Okay, so that takes care of that. So I will put this aside to dry. Oh, and get my book. Oh, get my book. Now let me just wipe off this so that I can close this because I don't need this anymore. Again, I'm putting everything at the end, all the supplies I use at the end of the video. I got masking tape galore here. I also, somebody emailed me, why don't you clean your table? See, I've got this is kids paper from IKEA. It's a roll, and I bought my granddaughter an artist easel, and I got some extra paper. All this paper that I make a mess on, I'm actually going to be using this as part of a journal experiment. That's why I don't care if it's really, really dirty, but just wanted to answer the lady who had that question. Oopsie. Okay, get my book. Let me just wipe this dry. And now we're going to basically talk to you a little bit about the alcohol. When you work with stuff that's metallic, sometimes you will get it'll be a little bit sticky, but because we're putting acrylics on top, and the acrylics that I used are the Traditions acrylics, they're a matte finish, they never stick together, the pages never stick. So what I have is I bought some alcohol. Now I got the 99% alcohol, and what I did is, you can get these little empty bottles from DecoArt, and I put it inside here. Okay, this smells pretty bad. Okay, so putting it into something like this, because I only need to drop it, works great, or you can use an eyedropper, but this way the smell is contained. Anytime you're using products that you have to use in a ventilated area, like this, you can also pick up a mask. You need to you can go to Lowe's or Home Depot or Home Hardware, wherever, and you can ask them for masks and tell them what you want to do with it, and then they'll recommend the actual specific mask. This one has a filter, and this is for fumes. Okay, but you need to read the directions. Under no circumstances should you be using any type of aerosol product indoors, regardless, even with this, because the stuff is getting in the air. But sometimes it's not practical. You can't, if you're in an apartment and don't have a balcony, well, open your window and try to spray it outside the window. But this is, a really good safety thing. With the rubbing alcohol this way, opened, I do wear the mask because it bothers me with my allergies. This way it doesn't. Okay, so I'm going to use dioxazine purple for this next step, and I want to make sure I don't get any metallic paint in there, and all I'm going to do is just shake the heck out of this bottle. I'm tapping it to get the paint to go back down the chamber. I'll just do it right here. And I'm using gray toned palette paper because first of all, there's very little glare. Anytime you stuff with white, there's sometimes a glare, but the gray tone paper, this is what I use when I'm doing professional painting because it's true to a neutral value. And this brush is too big to use. I'm not going to use this big massive brush. I'm going to use, where's that? That's dirty. That's dirty. I'll just use, I need something to get fast coverage. I'll use this. It's a little bit bigger than I wanted. All the other brushes are in use for something else. So I'm going to really soak it well. Okay, a lot of water. This particular technique is all about the consistency of this paint. And if it doesn't work, you just simply wipe it off. Okay? You don't want it too thin or everything's just going to mush together, and you don't want it too thick, otherwise the alcohol won't dissolve. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the purple over everything, and then we're going to drop the alcohol on it. And I'm just going to put some, this is no stick parchment paper. There we go. And you have to do this while it's wet. Now I do have to admit, sometimes this technique works on the first shot, sometimes it doesn't. It's because and if it doesn't work, it's because of the consistency of the paint. And I'm thinking this paint may be a bit thin. Okay, so this is dioxazine purple with a lot of water, and I'm not using medium because I don't want to extend the drying time. Make sure I've got everything covered. And then you just drop. And the higher the drop, you get splats. And I'm not squeezing it, I'm letting it come out by itself. You could also just shake it a little bit. See, there's no smell whatsoever. Cap that. And now you have to let it dry. You can't touch it whatsoever. You have to let it dry. Now, if you use the heat gun, you'll disturb everything, so you have to hold it way up high. A hair blower is actually worse because of the air force. But because there's so much paint on there, you may want, like when you do these backgrounds in a book, it's more inconvenient because you really can't do anything else while it's drying. Okay, because you can't put wax paper on this and let it dry. If possible, you really should just do these on single sheets and do them all at once. Like an assembly line. That's what I did last year when I was doing my backgrounds. I was working in a Canson mixed media book, and I ended up ripping everything out because it was just so inconvenient. But this page, I had to do something on it because with these videos, I usually do 2 spreads, okay, a left and a right. That way, they're left to dry by themselves. But this one here, I had a blank cover, so I thought, well, I might as well do something with it because for this particular segment, there were 3 things I wanted to show you. And I'm just making sure that it doesn't get so hot that's going to burn the paper, and I'm moving around. Now keep in mind too, alcohol is flammable, but it's mixing in with the water. Just use some common sense. If my hand is too hot to stay there, I have to pull the heat gun back up. But you don't want the air force to disturb the markings. Okay, so you would just do that, or let it dry naturally. Now, letting it dry naturally, you are looking for this whole page like this, to let it dry naturally, is going to be about between 30 to 45 minutes. Okay, and you saw the soupiness of the paint. Okay, this paint I'm going to be using as well on another page, so that's why I put out a lot. Okay, so I'm going to let this sit for a few minutes, and then when we come back, it'll be completely dry. I'll show you what we've done, and then we'll move on to the next one. Okay, it's dry enough for me. I'm just going to take a paper towel, and I'm just going to blot just the edges in case there's something a little bit wet on the outside. There was a little bit there. Now, what you're left with this page is some of the metallic showing through, and because dioxazine purple is translucent, it gives it a bit of a shimmer. Now you can see here where the paint was a little bit thicker. See all these nice dark pieces? But this would make for a nice kind of not a spiritual page, but like a astronomical page or something about what's out there type of thing. You can do anything with this, but to me this looks like stone, an effect you would get for stone. And then you can basically, from here, you can put another layer of color and then repeat the step over and over and over again. You can do that. But what I want to do now is I want to flip over. Oh, I got a little bit underneath. See, that's the problem you run into when working in a book like this, is that you run the risk of getting stuff underneath. To me, this doesn't matter because I'm going to be, you can use the book as is, but you can also, what I'm going to do is tear out the sheets and put them into my expanding journal, because I don't want a journal like this. I want to be able to, if I want to do a spread that's consistent in color, I'll want another page similar to this. So I'll want it like that. But if I use this book this way, I can't. But I can take the pages out to get a double page spread. And so I got some paint here too. The expanding journal, I have a video on my blog, which we used for the Dark Side of Vintage project, which I am using for the Dark Side of Vintage project. And my blog is artplace.ca, and you can get information about the Dark Side of Vintage project there, or you can go to creativeartjournaling.com. So for this one here, okay, I'm gonna pull out the colors that I need to work with now. So I'm going to do Prussian Blue and this one, and then I'm going to do the purple on this one. Now for this one here, I did a slip slap of paint using quinacridone violet, and again, I wanted the brush strokes, very, very rough brush strokes on that. And what you can do as well is you can, to further add to the technique, dangerous leaving my pens on my palette. And I'm just going to water this down just a little bit. So even with this page painted, I'm going to turn this because you won't be able to see the whole thing. You can as well take the same color of paint and you can put it on a texture roller. I love these things. There's so many neat things out in the market, and you can do that. Okay. Doesn't matter if you line them all up. Just don't keep going over and over the same area, because you'll mess up the boxes. Let's see if I do an extra one here, sort of like a filler. There we go. Okay. Now I'll put this in water. Oh, I've got too many rollers in my bucket there. Let me just clean this one. This was the metallic one. I need this one now. And my rub brush is fine. Okay, so this you need to let dry, and we would basically do the same technique as we did here. Okay, but I'm going to turn this now. I'm going to let that dry naturally. And what I want to do with this one is shake, shake, shake. I'm going to take some glaze. Oh, metallic glaze. And this is medieval gold. This is from DecoArt as well. Beautiful, beautiful color. Now for this one here, I'm going to have handy. I'm speaking well today. I have a Clorox wipe. You can use a baby wipe if you want. Have that. And then, preferably, a clean paper towel. Okay. Do I want to worry about protecting that page? Nah, not really. Okay. I'm going to dry my brush. Well, not dry it, but just blot it. I'm going to take some metallic glaze, and I'm just going to roughly paint the edges. I'm also not using my really, really good brushes for this, because I tend to be, when I'm creating mixed media stuff, I probably should have put paper underneath. The mixed media stuff, or stuff that requires a lot of, like where I'm letting my right brain go like crazy and I don't pay attention really to what I'm doing, I'll use the soft grip brushes, the fusion brushes, but the Majestic, which I use for a lot more detailed work on my Aqualon, I won't, because I don't want to ruin those brushes. And you don't want to put this on too thick. Now the heat wave is broken. It's quite cool out today, so I hope that what I'm going to do is going to work, because it's I've been so used to painting in a dry environment or a hot environment. Then I'm going to take a paper towel and I'm just going to wipe off the excess paint. Okay, you're not going to rub hard. You're just going to wipe off the excess. Okay, then with the Clorox wipe, you're going to touch, push, lift. And what it's going to do is it's going to remove some of the paint. Be careful on how much you do this. What you don't want is just to remove all the paint. Oh, Mia came in for a visit and she dropped her bone on the floor. I had to stop for a second. Okay, well, let's see if I can still remove some of this. It's, yeah, a little bit. I'm going to really focus on some of those red areas. See, once it dries, not a lot you can do, but this is dried now from the time she came in and dropped her bone. I had to edit out that clunk. It's been about a minute. So you let it sit and then you pull it off. Now what I'm avoiding, see how I've got that square block there? I'll just kind of break that up a little bit, like so. And anywhere where the paint is really thin, I'll take advantage of that. So really let that that violet come through. The edges as well. Whoops, almost bent the paper there. And I'm doing this slow. Well, first of all, because if you're new to this type of stuff and just don't want to speed through everything, but at the same time, if I work too fast, I don't want to rip my paper or have it come up and curl up. I don't want to damage it. And I'm really looking for the pieces that I want to focus on. And you'll notice when the page is ready, like dry and ready to go, no amount of rubbing will bring the paint up. What you don't want to do is rub so hard that you actually start pulling, like damaging the top of the paper. There we go. Okay, now this is drying, so you can see how beautiful that's looking. Okay, and we'll just cover that now. Don't do this over your painting. And I like the glaze because the glaze is transparent. Okay. And although this is fairly dry now, I am going to hit it with the heat gun just for a little bit. Just for a little bit. I might as well do this one too. There are some pieces of really, really thick paint over there, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. What I need to do is do a video on what happens when you use a heat gun too close to your paper. All right, now Prussian blue or dioxazine purple. I already have the Prussian blue out. I really wanted to use the Prussian blue though. I have dioxazine that I want to use on this side. Okay, we'll do it over here. Now, Prussian blue, this is a mixed Prussian blue. It's with phthalo blue and black. Just closing that cap. So you can make it yourself. It's a very, very dark blue that's slightly on the greenish side. And I'm just going to slap that paint on there. Watching the consistency. Now the metallic paint, depending on how thick your acrylics are, will repel a little bit. You can see it happening here. Excuse me. Which is fine. But the consistency of this paint, that's the key for this technique. Too thin and you'll just have everything will just blend in together when you put the alcohol, and too thick, the alcohol won't penetrate. And what's so cool about this technique is that your backgrounds will always be different. You cannot let this dry though, so you have to work fast. Alright, so I'm going to try one. Oh. Now let's see, I want to get some splats. And now look at the purple and the gold showing through. I want to get some really small. This looks like DNA. no, I'm not DNA. If you know about all that stuff, I probably sound stupid, but it looks like blood cells or something like that. I'm going to think of it as like bubbles. Okay, let me just quickly hit that with the heat gun. Again, the best thing to do would be to let it dry naturally. Okay, that would be the best thing to do. And when using the heat gun, make sure that you put the alcohol far away. You don't want it to be too close. What I want to do is I just want to dry it, just not until it's completely dry, but just enough where I can move the book without everything shifting. Okay, that's ready to go. Because I have to turn this now. So we're going to let that dry, but look how beautiful that is. I'm going to turn that. I'll work on this one now. Like this one here, you've got the pink and the gold shining through. It's absolutely beautiful. Now on this side, because I've got a page underneath, I'm going to put this over here. And all it's going to protect is this page, not that page. Oh, I might as well put this here as well, just to extra protection. And now with this one, I'm going to use the dioxazine purple with a lot of water. That might be a bit thin. Okay, that can go in water now. And we'll, oh, I just came up with, oh, I wonder if I could do this. No, it doesn't quite hold. Oh, that is so awesome. The dioxazine purple is thin enough that it's going to show the little squares through it. Let's get a big one. It's so thin, it's thin enough, like transparent, where it's going to let the squares from the roller show through, but not so thin that it's going to change the actual color. Let me just hit this a little bit on the side. And I don't want to put the air force too close to the paper, otherwise it's going to move the splats, the blooming. So you can see some of the squares through here. Beautiful. And as it starts to really dry, then you can really use the heat gun to push it. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry, and then we come back, it'll all be finished, and we'll see what it looks like. I had to sop up some of the paint along the edges because it was so thick, and I liked the effect that I was getting, so I just took the paper towel and I started blotting as I was drying, and it gives me even nicer effect. That page by itself, that would have taken about an hour to dry. I just don't have that kind of time for drying. I'm very impatient when it comes to drying. And this one, I believe, is all set and done. All right. Oh, I got some paint underneath. Oh well. You will. Yeah, this you'll never be able to avoid. It'll just add to the page. There we go. this over. So there we are. Isn't that beautiful? This is my favorite, this one here. That is so beautiful. And this one. Well, you can see a little bit of the shine there? It's still a little bit damp. Even this is nice. See, this would make for a nice spread. But if you were doing it, if you want to do like a full page spread, you can, this is where I was saying that if you did this again on here, it wouldn't make any sense. But if you just tore this page out and you had another one similar to this, you could tear that page out, trim off the edges, and then put it into the expanding journal that I have on my blog. It just gives you more flexibility to add single sheets into your piece. And this one's really cool too. That's neat. So there we go. So we got 3 backgrounds out of this. Now the only thing that you really can do now is you can build upon it. But what I thought I'd do is, we've got these ones here are relatively dry. I'm going to come back to this one. Okay, and I'm going to do a glaze and then one more. So this is now going to be with 2 layers. Okay, so I'm taking the quinacridone violet, and I need a big brush, a clean brush preferably. Okay, lots of water. You can even mist your page a little bit. Don't mistake the page, the paint being thin versus transparent. When I say thin, whoopsie. When I say thin, I mean the consistency is thin, not transparent. The transparency, that's what I want. See, this is a glaze where you can still see what's underneath. This is a glaze. Okay. Oh, I think I just splashed, I just splashed paint. I picked up my brush like this and the paint flickered right onto my monitor. I better get that cleaned or Joe's going to have a conniption. I'm just wetting that. This paint may be a little bit too thick to do the same technique again. The big brushes are much better to use. Let's see if, I don't know if it'll be too thick. Yeah, see, it's too thick because nothing's happening. It is doing a bit of a bloom. Okay, it is doing a bit of a bloom, but there's not a heck of a lot happening. We need to... Oh, see, now what's happening is I'm rubbing this and the actual paint is coming off. That's another thing to look at. There we go. There we are. So this is with 2 layers of paint. And honestly, unless you absolutely have to, don't use a heat gun on that. Just let it sit naturally. I'm just kind of drying the edges to stop the paint from rolling. Paint will look for the easiest point of exit. It follows moisture. So if the page was wet here, it would just travel down. So if I dry this, the edges, the paint will stop. Okay, so now we're gonna let this sit for a bit, and then we come back, we'll see what we've got. Okay, it's now relatively dry, and I can come in with my Clorox wipe, and I can distress some of the circles, not by totally wiping everything out, but just by pulling out some of the areas. This only works if the page is fresh, meaning you've just finished it, okay? If you let it sit to dry for a few hours, then it won't work. But see how I'm just kind of pulling that off? Let's see if you can see that, see? has to be wet, a little wet first, and then you pull the paint off. Wet it first, then a little bit of pressure. Wet it first, then a little bit of pressure. There we go. The rubbing alcohol is mixing in with the paint, so it's a little bit weaker. But this looks like it's got some splashes, and which is really cool. See that? It just all looks like it's all torn and just. This would be a really, really cool look if it was like with the transparent red iron oxides, like the vintage colors. This would be really cool to distress the page like that. We'll be doing that in another video. This step here is optional. You don't have to do this. I just wanted to really grunge up the page a little bit more. Let's get this corner here. There we go. That is really neat. Now with these backgrounds, you can leave them the way they are, or you can further build upon them. That's up to you. These are just done to get rid of that white page freeze, you know, where you're frozen by a white page. And we'll just hit this with a heat gun, and then we'll be all finished. The look would obviously be different if there was no metallic paint underneath, because the silver sage is still showing through. So if you didn't want a metallic finish on this, just use the matte acrylic paint. In the same respect, if you're using the matte acrylic paint, and because you've got the traditional finish dries to a matte finish, you could always cover it with a varnish if you wanted like a satin or a glossy look. I have a sneeze coming on that's driving me absolutely crazy. Darn allergies. So there we go. So you can see where the shine is. Okay. Beautiful. And with these backgrounds, like I was saying in the last few videos, is that you can use these as a base for a journal page. You can run them through a die cut machine for embellishments. You can cut them into smaller pieces for smaller journal pages. You can also do a portrait or painting right on top of this, where the background is secondary. You just need something back there, like even a people portrait or a pet portrait type of thing. These backgrounds are just secondary. This is my favorite. Oh, I love this. Then we have these two. So this one here, you can see a little bit of the shine. I see a steampunk theme with this one and this one. These I may actually use for Dark Side of Vintage because they are amazing. This is actually nice too. I could use it for Dark Side of Vintage. I could use this for the fairy theme. That's cute. But there we go. So we got 3 spreads done on this. So basically it's acrylic paint down, you let it dry, then a very wash of a darker color on top, drip some alcohol on top. I use 99%, and everything will bloom, and then let it dry naturally. Alright, so I hope that you enjoyed this particular technique lesson, and hope you give it a try. I'll be doing more of this in other videos, but combining it with different techniques where I really start getting into layering. So I can do something like this, and then I'll use bubble wrap to stamp stuff, or use stamps to go on top. So I'll be combining a lot of the techniques, but this gives you a really good idea where to start, because these are fast. Alright, so hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, stay inspired.